Welcome to the Revenue Driver Podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Well, welcome to our first show, our pilot of our podcast. So we're going to talk about a lot of topics to set the stage for the kind of info that we're going to be sharing in future shows. And I think one of the most important topics is, why is marketing so darn confusing? And why is it really intimidating to a lot of business owners? So Jay, I'm going to throw this topic over to you as our man sales guy. You got a lot of these questions. So what have you heard?
Well, I don't often hear exactly that they're saying, I'm super confused. I just think there's a lot of misunderstandings around it. And I do believe that the reason is our fault as marketers, where, again, I don't know if it's an imposter syndrome issue or a lack of confidence, but I've seen numerous people go to a company to explain the value of marketing and using all the jargon and acronyms. And I think there is a misunderstanding that you have to say all this stuff to sound smart. And at the end of the day, for most companies, the results is what makes you look smart. And so that's really where I think we need to get rid of all of this fluff and just talk about what's important. And then at the end of the day, for most business owners, just revenue growth. They don't care if it's from email or social media or 42 blog posts. They just care that we're delivering valuable conversations or potential opportunities to their sales team, which actually kind of ties into an area that I wanted to touch on, Sarah, is that I think you're in a unique role as the COO of StringCan, where you're getting involved in a lot of, how to make the sausage. And so one of the things I was wondering from your perspective is, what do you believe some of the biggest, misconceptions are about a marketing agency that you're hearing from the rest of our team?
Well, there's frankly so many different types, which is one where you can be really tactical and get in the weeds, where you've got a PR shop, a social media shop, you've got creative, and you can really one-off a lot of marketing tactics. And I think it feels like you have a lot more control when you say, oh, I know we need this and I'm going to go after it, versus, the full service agency, which is kind of more strategic and can tie everything in and then create alignment with you and your team on what types of tactics you're going to make moving forward with progress for the sales team, for, really marketing touches so many parts of the business. And I think that's part of the confusion too, is they go in really focused on sales, but it kind of tackles all of the parts and creates a more cohesive brand. You then can tackle recruiting, your recognition in the market is marketing, but then obviously what they're coming to us for is sales. And so how do you kind of create that flow with all of those opportunities? It's really overwhelming because there are so many opportunities in general. So, what do you think the biggest misconception is about a marketing agency?
Well, I think there is probably that idea of, when you hire a lawyer, a lawyer is going to have a set hourly rate. And I think, again, even for us, I know this gets you worried about when we hire, partners, and you don't really understand how much time something takes. And you get an invoice for $25,000 for addressing a topic that you thought only should take a few hours. And it's obviously a huge surprise. And so I feel like that's probably where one of the areas that causes problems is that if a business owner is looking to hire a marketing person or a marketing agency, and they don't really understand exactly what it takes to go from point A to point B, their understanding might be that it should take only a few hours, but that person might need 50 hours, not a few hours. And that's really where I think we have some problems. There isn't an alignment regarding, here is the missed opportunity you have in your business and why you're looking for a marketing person or marketing agency to help you. I think that we need to do a better job as marketers to explain some of that to avoid any of those kind of surprises. Because again, most business owners like myself, I don't do well with surprises, but I also don't want to get down in the weeds. So I'm not asking you to exactly explain to me how every element of the sausage is being made, but I do want to understand, hey, what you're asking, here's the process I'm going to follow, here's the timing I need, and here's roughly what I think the budget's going to look like. How does that align with what you're expecting of me? I think that can help address some of those misunderstandings.
Mm. So, talking specifically about B2B marketing, which I actually had a great conversation last night with a business owner who really could go both ways. He could go B2B or B2C, and that required a very different approach. And explaining that to him because he said, marketing is really confusing. You're in marketing. Can you help me? And it was actually a little bit of a struggle to find a way to start unpacking it for someone who's tried something without being disparaging about the efforts that have already gone into it, which I think is part of the problem, right? Marketing evolves so quickly. How do we, judge what we've done, but also look forward and innovate and continue to learn? So, maybe over the last decade, how do you think B2B marketing has evolved?
Well, I think for me, again, it goes back to when we started StringCan 14 years ago. I came up with the idea of StringCan because I want to keep it simple. Back to, when kids were growing up and doing the fun, the cans and the string, that connection is very fragile, but it's a really traditional way to kind of think about communication. And so for me, the process we use for strategy, obviously it's evolved and improved over the last 14 years, but the methodology is still exactly the same. I really do believe that it's like you don't got to reinvent the wheel or make a better mousetrap in this scenario. Obviously, we could find ways to be more efficient and go faster because everyone wants to get to market quicker. But I do believe like the good to great, the Jim Collins and those kind of mindsets, that is all still extremely valuable, especially in a more complex sales world like in the B2B space. So how you develop the strategy for going from where you are to where you want to go, I feel like overall is still pretty consistent. What's changed a ton is all of the technology and the ways to be more efficient around this, especially with like AI. And so I think it comes down to trying to avoid some shiny objects. Again, go back to your basics of here's where I'm at in my company, here's where I want to go from the B2B perspective. Here is the value that we're going to deliver to our ideal customer in the B2B space, and then figure out, are there other tools, technology, process, procedures, resources that are going to help you get there smarter and faster. That's probably where I'm seeing some of the biggest trends on having access to so many cool tools and data sets to help you make smarter decisions on how you leverage these various different tactics.
And I think slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
I love that.
And I think we read that in Effortless or Essentialism, but you know, it's really easy to want to move super fast. And when you do that, you kind of miss a lot of gaps, and then they uncover themselves in the most inopportune times as you're growing your pipeline. And so that's why I think strategy is, to your point, a really critical piece. And typically the processes should be somewhat similar because it is very strategic and well thought out. And it's really the tactics that have evolved to meet the strategy and make it better. And I'm excited for what we're doing with AI and how that's going to help B2B businesses and grow them and give them better tools. And I think it's going to be really exciting.
I love that. Well, I think on that, getting back to your role, which I think is you have, again, a very unique perspective. One of the areas that I know recently with our team and yourself got involved with one of our clients talking about how can we better understand the needs of your customer. We do a lot of qualitative and quantitative research, but what are some things that you've seen different around how a B2B company can better understand their customer?
What's interesting is it's been a little bit of the old social media management and reviews, and kind of like understanding that those are in a way mini case studies and testimonials. And I think that because of technology has gotten a lot more prevalent, it's also easily manipulated. So you have to show up no matter what, whether you believe the review or not. You have to engage with your customers, whether you're B2B or B2C, it doesn't matter. Showing that you care and you're empathetic and that you have this human side of you is really critical, because businesses are looked at with more skepticism than they ever have been before because there's more information out there. So how do you control how the information is presented? And that's through a lot of marketing tactics, frankly. So I'd say like owning that and understanding that that is a critical piece and can be used to your advantage. Ignoring it and just pretending like that's not going to affect you, or nobody's going to look at that, it's really not beneficial in the long run.
Love it. So I'm curious, in some past couple client projects, I know I've heard from you that, sometimes the owner is wondering what his role would be and/or his or her leadership team's role. When it comes to talking with customers, do you have any perspective on who do you think should be doing that? And then how do they cascade up and down what they've learned to help arm marketing and sales and ops and all the other departments on how they can do a better job in truly engaging with their ideal client?
Like who starts the top of the feedback cycle?
Sure.
It probably would be best if it's someone who isn't biased to the feedback. So if it's someone who, let's say we see feedback for an account manager, for example, in a B2B business. So it's a direct line person that's dealing with a customer. You wouldn't want that. They're going to have defense mechanisms pop up. And that's normal, I think, because we don't have all the facts. So it's who can go and get all the facts first. I'm a high fact finder in the Colby shocker. I think you're high on the risk side.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's how do we kind of unpack this and then what's good about it and what's bad about it. And so someone who can be very logical minded, but then also show empathy with, I can hear your side of the story, customer, I hear your side of the story, internal person. How do we kind of learn from each other? And there's obviously innovations that are gold mines in those reviews too. So if your customers are complaining about packaging, for example, like I swear, every time I go buy my laundry detergent, the cap has changed. And I'm like, someone must be complaining about this because every 4 to 6 weeks, I have a brand new package that I have to figure out with this laundry soap. So somebody's listening and they're trying to make it better, which I really appreciate. And so I think that's part of it too, is showing that you care and then doing something about it. Whether you make the right or wrong decisions, if you're doing something about it and you care, you can't go wrong. So, when we talk about aligning to those departments, so we're talking a little bit about the execution team, you've got the marketing team and the sales team and finance. And so these disparate types of individuals that are really supporting the overall growth of an organization, there's obviously a lot of opportunity for blame and finger pointing, especially with marketing and sales. It's like a constant meme of fighting. How would you suggest that, that alignment get created through a B2B business, through marketing and sales?
So I think for me, in reflecting on I've been doing this now for almost 25 years. The part that I have found to cause a lot of frustration, not only on the business side, but also on our side, is where somebody has a voice inside the company and they're like, ooh, here's this new shiny object. For example, when TikTok first came out, we had a couple clients that approached us and said, hey, my niece is recommending we leverage TikTok for our business. Can you go ahead and create a strategy and do that for us? And I always push back and say why. Not that I think that's a bad idea, but I want to understand the goals and objectives. And so I feel like, again, I'm loving some of these questions we're talking about is focusing on the customer. Obviously, the business itself and the leadership team needs to have very clear vision on where they are and where they want to go and why, and communicate that out to all the various different team members involved in helping scale and growing the company. But when it comes to the marketing activities to align the marketing team to the actual vision of the company, my whole thing is fish where the fish are at. And so, yes, some of these new platforms or tools could be effective, but if you aren't really owning the areas where you're currently investing, adding one more tactic or tool into your toolbox likely is just going to spread your team too thin. And so my whole idea around it is I'm not saying spend months of time doing research, but do enough just so you have some validation that here is a new idea that we have, and we do believe that our ideal customer is either engaging or involved in that various different area. That way it makes sense when you are investing time and money into that, you're hopefully going to see an ROI. So again, my whole point of that question would be is focusing on the customer. Yes, you can help educate your audience on, oh, here's a new way to engage with us. Yes, that could happen. But if you aren't already there and you aren't being effective in how you're currently using the foundational tools, then I would say start with that. Make sure that you're fully leveraging that, being consistent with your voice and your frequency, measuring the ROI of your efforts on those various platforms. And then if and when you have the capacity and or a new strategy around your organization, then you can go and try other things. But again, I would just keep it super simple.
Yeah, threw another acronym at us with ROI, which most people I think are familiar with, but it kind of has a life of its own, right? So talking a little bit about metrics, it's part of the alignment process. What do you think are the most important metrics that we should be measuring to make sure that we're feeling like, oh yeah, this is actually working?
Well, again, I think when it comes to a business, there's really two major numbers. It's top line revenue and bottom line profit. And so, end of the day, whatever you're going to be focusing on needs to help get you to where you want to go, either around your investment strategy or return, or depending upon what your business goals are. And so, I think from there, number one is the business itself needs to have their one or two key performance indicators, the KPIs, that they're really measuring how that company is effectively growing to reach the goals or objectives you're aiming for. And then everyone in the company, department, and individuals need to align to that. So I'm not a huge fan of the vanity metrics. Like, again, marketers were notorious for throwing out, a dashboard full of stuff. And if I was an owner of a business looking at these dashboard that has 45 different boxes and widgets on it, I have no clue what I'm looking at and how this is really making a difference. And so I think if you can really try hard, I know it's really difficult, but if you had one, metric that you were focusing on for each department, and you could see how that's connected to the company's main metrics, then I think you're going to have a much better chance of having success. The focus, I think, would be hugely valuable there. When it comes to the sales team, obviously, you can look at number of closed deals, but the challenge with that is almost like looking in a rearview mirror. You really don't have an indicator what activities are needed to make sure that you're going to have that be effective. So I think you kind of need to have a leading and a lagging, a metric, probably, especially in like a sales and marketing department. So in marketing, I wouldn't recommend like number of website visits, because is it quality visits? End of the day, I think it should be more about the leads that marketing is generating to help the sales team have opportunity. So number of MQLs, marketing qualified leads, could be a really, really good metric to focus on the marketing team side, versus being number of social media posts, a number of blog posts, a number of website traffic. And then the sales team side is how many opportunities are you pushing through from a marketing lead to be a sales qualified lead? And then of those, how many are turning into appointments, contracts, etc. Thinking about, the whole pipeline. So I just think you got to look at what metrics really matter and making sure that every single week you're talking about what's working and what's not. If it's not working, having those conversations.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think this is a whole nother episode with lagging, leading, MQL, SQL, because really like asking those questions of what am I measuring, and read Measure What Matters, by the way. But, is that actually going to change anything that I'm doing in my business? Or again, is that a vanity metric, which means it's not really doing anything? Okay, so really, there is a lot of jargon in marketing. We kind of have our own language, I'd say. Like, I would actually suggest that we need our own dictionary.
Or translator.
Yeah, translator. That's what we are.
Sure.
Which it shouldn't be that way. But, there is part of marketing is jargon, which is a little bit of trying to explain what a business is selling in the language that the customer understands versus the language that the business understands. Sounds super simple, should be easy, but as you and I know, it's really hard. It's even hard for us to do ourselves, where we speak a certain way, but that's just not how they understand it. I mean, we've got words like ICP, persona, funnel, KPI, MQL, SQL. I could go on. It is. It's word salad. So why do you think it is so complex?
I think that, the barrier entry to be a marketer, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I'm a glass full kind of guy, but there is a very, very low entry to barrier. I mean, to become a marketer, you can go and get a book and now all of a sudden you're the best marketer out there. And then with all the things like TikTok and whatnot, these influencers out there are, preaching all this amazing stuff. And that's where I think a lot of the shiny object syndrome issues come into play. And that's really what I think is going on. And then we're all trying to figure out how to build a better mousetrap because we're trying to eat our own dog food about how to differentiate our brands. And so, look at HubSpot. They were selling hard the marketing funnel, inbound marketing, and aligning sales and marketing, and then basically focus now on the flywheel, which again, another acronym that we'll address in a later episode. But I think that's where you have all of these kind of from top down and bottom up, all these individuals and companies talking about their new mousetrap. And then marketers hear that and then it amplifies the messaging from there about how to tell their clients, here's how we can help you with this new, shiny object thing. And so that's where I think it just perpetuates that whole entire problem from there. And that's really why I think it gets often confusing. Again, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And so my whole thing is let's just stop worrying about what tactics they are and all the jargon. Let's focus on the strategy and the objectives of the company and focus on this Grand Canyon gap you've got between where you are and where you want to go. And then the benefit of an experienced marketing team like ours, we have seen what works and what doesn't work in the B2B space. And so I think if you rely on people that you can trust, a trusted advisor to help guide you through, ignore all the fluff and all the marketing jargon, here are the things that are going to move the needle, that's where I think there's a lot of value.
Well, and I think it's complex too because it changes a lot. And it can be really intimidating to keep up with it. And I think that's why I love working in marketing, is I never liked jobs that I could figure out and then do with my eyes closed. I always wanted to be challenged and become an innovator in whatever I was doing. And it was really hard with some of the industries I've had experience in, like education is typically one that struggles a lot, but marketing is just never ending. It never sleeps. And that can be really scary. And it's really fun for us marketers. So, where a business needs to lean on and trust the agency is that we're doing our best to keep up with it, but also filtering out the nonsense and the garbage because, the drama of AI over the last year has been hilarious. You and I are super engaged with it. We use it a lot in our organization. We're very aligned with the purpose of that tool, but I've heard more people than not even start using it because they're so confused, so intimidated. They just don't even know where to start. And again, to your point about strategy, is it would make those things less complex and less confusing when you have the strategy to sort of keep you in line, sort of those bumpers, right? The bowling bumpers of what am I doing and why, right? So I think that is a lot for us to cover today.
That was a mouthful.
We clearly have a lot to cover. And so we would absolutely love any questions that you all have. Please send them into podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. We will answer them on the air. And Jay, this was an awesome episode. Thank you so much.
That was fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Please follow us, and we'd love to hear you maybe as a guest. So reach out to us, and until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Driver Podcast. Send us questions at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. And please follow us for more episodes packed with insights to drive your business forward.